Good morning. Just wanted to do an update today based on an event I completed yesterday, which was the Leadville 50. It was a tough event and a tough day, to be honest with you, and I had an expectation that it was going to be difficult, but I will say it was more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I haven't been riding that long and having a track background for, basically my entire life. Getting on a bike and trying to put those sort of miles in was definitely a challenge for me. And I thought I'd done enough work. I'd ridden somewhere in the vicinity of 17,000 metres climbed in the last few months. This particular event, although my Garmin only showed about 1,500 metres climbed, I thought it was 2,500, so I just need to check some data there. But what I didn't anticipate was the amount of walking that you have to do. Some of the climbs get up to 18% and they're just full of fist-sized rocks, and you basically can't ride over them. And because everyone else is walking in front of you, you don't have that opportunity to actually even attempt to ride because you just can't get around people. I would love to know whether the leaders were able to ride up that. I'm assuming they were, but it was definitely a challenging day for me. 50 miles, lots of climbing, 4 major climbs, I think, and just the rock gardens and so forth were pretty brutal, to be honest. You had to have pretty good downhill skills as well. And again, I'm not a bike rider, I'm not a mountain bike rider, and there was definitely plenty of people out there with a lot more skill than I had. But overall, I'm pretty happy that I finished the event. I came in just under 7 hours, 6 hours, 59 minutes. And basically my Garmin only showed I was riding for 5.5 of those hours. So I technically walked for an hour and a half. One of the climbs, the second big climb of the day is virtually, there's no way in the world I could ride up that. And it was a long walk. It was, substantial. I think it was 1.5 miles or 2 miles of walking and pushing your bike. And I was saying to a friend last night that some of the grades when you were walking your bike were so steep and just their feet slipping underneath them trying to get the grip. It was pretty brutal. The only disappointment for me was the last climb of the day, coming back up the dirt road on the side of the mountain. And if you're familiar with the event, you'll know which one I'm talking about. One, I started to get beaten down by the sun. It got to, I think, about 80, maybe a little bit over, 25 degrees it was Celsius. And that started to take its toll on me. I got, I was being hammered by that sun. I got fairly burnt, although I had sunscreen all over my body. I did run out of water on that last climb, and it tessellated between 5 and 8%, I think, and it felt like I was back in Vale Mountain, which typically I would be able to climb that quite easily and just get that rhythm because it was on a flat surface. I just had nothing in my legs whatsoever. I had to keep getting off the bike, walking for a little bit, getting back on. Then I didn't want to walk because I'd blistered up because I had no idea I was going to walk so much in mountain bike shoes. So I had a blister on my heel, which was just bothering me. It was interesting. I watched some guys do the 100 either last year or the year before, and they videoed the event, and they were talking about those times when they went dark. And it was a funny thing for me because in the back of my mind, I was trying not to think about that when you get to that point where it was hurting so much and you just don't want to be out there anymore. But I was fortunate enough I didn't go through that absolute darkness where you just want to give up and be out of there. The last part of the race, the last probably 2 miles back down to the the starting area, was a point where I just wanted it to be over though. There was a big downhill, 9 miles of downhill, whatever it is. And then there was one more little climb, and it wasn't much of a climb, but I just had enough by this stage. I just wanted that climb to be over. But I just wanted to do an update. My journey through this event was, I was looking forward to it. I was looking forward to the challenge, and I really wanted to get that one out the way. If someone was to ask me would I do it again, yesterday I probably would have said no way. Today it's only not even 24 hours since I finished yet, and If I got the prep work in, I would definitely go out and actually walk up hills with my bike on really rough gravel just to get used to that walking. And I would start in the first group. You know, I didn't want to impair anybody yesterday because I knew I was going to be quite slow. So I started off in the second wave. But there was a lot of people in front of me just on that first climb that I could have easily gone around, but it got a bit messy. So I did sit back. It's nice to see you go past people throughout the day, then you catch them back up. There was a girl that I was riding with quite a lot, and she could climb so well. She couldn't descend as well as I could, so I kept picking her up on the descents and getting around her. Then she'd pick me back up on the climbs. And she was definitely worked really hard, and I ran into her after the race and I congratulated her. So, and there was another girl I saw climbing out there so well as well. So it was interesting that some of the ladies out there were just such good climbers. But overall, look, you know, I enjoyed the event. I can't fathom how the guys do the 100 when there was still 8 kilometers or 3 or 4 miles to go to the halfway point. Like, my brain was like, I'm not at the halfway point. I've got to turn around and go back over these hills because it's an out and back course and do this all again. But the main thing that I wanted to touch on was just preparation for the event for a beginner, for a novice. You definitely need to have reasonably good downhill skills. If you don't have great downhill skills, and I'm not just talking about going down a downhill gravel road or even a downhill track, which we have on the mountain, which are cut out with the berms and stuff. They're pretty easy to navigate. You need to have downhill rock garden skills, unless you want to get off and walk your bike down there. But you need to be confident to sit back over your seat, and let your bike actually do the work and feather over those rocks. Otherwise, you are really going to, one, lose time and be in trouble. If you don't have those skills and you get your front wheel caught somewhere, you're probably going over the handlebars. Secondly, fluid and food I was actually pretty good with. My food in the morning, I had porridge and a slice of avocado toast quite early. So it was about an hour and a half before the race. I had coffee on the way out there. And that's my normal. I did have a big scoop of protein powder in my porridge to make sure that I did ingest some protein in the morning, so it just wasn't all carbohydrate for me. Throughout the day, I basically took I had stingers, and there's new stingers with caffeine in there. I had some of the stinger waffles. Oh no, the goo waffles. They gave me some goos prior to the race. I didn't use them. I hadn't used goo before, and I wasn't sure about just how my gut would react to that. I was so used to the stingers. I did have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which I had at the halfway point. That was a game changer for me. I was just starting to get the food flats, even though it had, I was keeping up the stingers and so forth, but just having that high glycogen hits all the time, and my body is not used to that. So the peanut butter jelly sandwich was a game changer. I had 2 bottles of water on my bike. I had one on the bike, and I wore a Patagonia backpack, or the waist bag, which I found really beneficial. I'd been riding with a backpack on in the mountain on Vale where I live, and the other week I rode for about 3.5 hours in quite warm temperatures, about 85, and the perspiration and the heat in my body, because I couldn't actually let that heat dissipate through that backpack, was horrendous. And I thought I'll try this the waist bag, which was definitely a game changer. Link in the description below. I used a Patagonia one, which basically carried 2 bottles. I had the 1 bottle in there, but I had a spare tube, my sandwich, my toolkit, and a neck scarf, because when I first took off it was a little bit cold, and I thought if I get really warm throughout the day I was going to wet that down and put it back on, and my arm warmers, which I started with at the start of the day. I would wear next time, if I ever was to do a longer ride and be exposed like that, the sun arm warmers, because I did get quite burnt even though I had sunscreen on. If you're only going to be out there for 3-4 hours and you're a great rider, then probably not too bad, but when you're out there for 7. So I think that was a big thing for me. The waist bag. I did run out of fluid on the way back up the last climb, and you were fully exposed on the side of a hill. And I nearly thought about asking someone else for some water, because I was definitely reaching that point. I don't know why. I mustn't have filled up my bottle at the last bottle stop. I think I had 1 empty and 1 full one. I thought I'd be okay to get up that last climb, but I really did hit the wall going up there. I rode a Giant Anthem, a 2021 model, dual suspension, 100mm up front, 90mm on the rear. And I was considering prior to the race a couple of weeks ago trying to buy, well, I've been trying to purchase the giant carbon frame, same wheel set, just the aluminum wheels, but has the carbon frame, and it's a hardtail. I forget what that bike's particularly called. I'm still trying to get one because I do like climbing quite a lot. However, I'm really glad now that I didn't have that bike on race day. For me personally, the downhill stuff, I think I would have really struggled on a hardtail coming down some of those rock gardens. Without any people there, you may have been able to navigate down, if you were just riding on your own, but with people around you, you had to cross over through some fairly gnarly rocks occasionally, and that rear suspension just helped me out. The other thing I had to remember was to lock off. I prefer to have the bike locked off when I'm climbing, so I was locking that out when I was doing the climbing, and also then, remembering to actually unlock my front and rear shock when I was descending. I tend to do that sometimes when I'm still on the bike, which gets a bit dodgy, and I was in some steeper sections, so I had to slow down and stop to actually do that. Overall, look, it was definitely a challenge. I did puncture once as well, and I didn't realise that the bike shop that I purchased my bike from had put I forget what it's called, but the resin basically in the tyre, and I took the rear tyre off, and it's not a quick release. I had to use an Allen key to pull it off, pull the boost bar out, and then I noticed the tyre hadn't gone flat all the way, and I'm like, well, what's going on here? And I had a cartridge, so I put the cartridge on there, but I've already got the wheel off. And then I saw the goo stuff coming out of the tyre, and then noticed it was actually sealing, and then was able to put a cartridge on there and blow the tyre back up. I couldn't empty the cartridge out, so my tyre was a little bit low, but that cost me a little bit of time, and that was on a really nice wide open descent, but it was very shaly, and I was hitting some rocks in the middle, and then I actually thought I blew a rear shock because I did hit like a bit of a bump and a rock in the road quite hard. But that's one thing I definitely do. I would definitely make sure that I've got that if you're running tubeless tyres, that goo in your tyre, you don't want to puncture and be, having to sort of fix things. So that was a convenience having that in there. Put the CO2 cartridge straight on the tyre. I did stop at a water station. They had a pump there, so I was able to pump it up a little bit more. So I think overall, given I'm a novice rider, my preparation was pretty good. Food was good. As I said, I ran out of water. I would probably ride with the 2 water bottles on that pack, given how long I was out there for on some of the climbs. If I knew I wasn't going to be out there as long, I would probably just have the 1 bottle, 1 on the bike. You could probably put 2 on your bike if you got the space. I did notice that some people had their bike all kitted up and had no backpacks. A lot of people wore camelbacks. As I said, I just find those way too hot, so I will definitely just stick to the waist bag. The downside, you can get the waist bag with the bladder inside them as well. The downside with the waist bag with the water bottles is that you really need to stop to get them out. They're quite difficult to pull out. If I was overheating, then I was actually, and my bottle in the bike was empty, I would actually stop and change them over. But given that I was just trying to finish the event and to lose that 30 seconds to pull over and change, it didn't matter to me. Shoe wise, I wore a pair of Shimano's. That's straight off the bike from yesterday, so they're filthy still. I don't even know what they're called, but they were good, and they definitely got a good sole to walk in. You do trash your cleat because you're walking on rocks, and I noticed I couldn't clip back in a couple of times, and I don't know if because I'd round that off or I may have had some stones stuck in there. Overall, these things clear pretty well. You can see the tread's pretty open. I just hadn't walked in them before, and obviously mountain bike shoes don't have any flex, so to try and walk in them is pretty tough, but they did blister me in one part of the shoe. So as I said, not thinking I was going to have to walk as much was a bit of a surprise for me. And I did try and research as much as I could online, and I met another guy on the course who was sitting down just grabbing some food, and he said a buddy of his had completed the event before and said that you should practice walking with a mountain bike. And I highly recommend that. If you're going to go on this event, I would actually go and find a grade somewhere around 12, 13, 14, 15% even. I think it got up to 18%, and just practice pushing your bike uphill in your mountain bike shoes. If you haven't walked a lot in your shoes, you potentially will blister. So I would actually be breaking those in from a walking point of view, or making sure your sock is the right sock inside that shoe. I had a Garmin computer on the bike. Did I really use it? No. It has a climbing feature on it, which I didn't know how to activate. It's quite a new computer, so I need to research that a little bit more. Mentally, I wasn't too sure if I wanted to know how much I had to climb. I got a bit confused because I didn't actually use my Garmin watch, which I tend to normally use. But I looked at the time, and my Garmin computer was telling me I'd been out there for 3 hours, but my watch was basically, at 12:30, so that meant I'd been out for 4.5 hours. And I'm like, I'm sure we took off at 8 o'clock, but it was because the Garmin computer stops when you walk. So I had, 4.5 hours, or sorry, 5.5 hours of elapsed riding time. But my overall race time was 7 hours, so or 6:59. I'll say 6:59, so I claim under 7 hours. That basically allowed me to, so it said I was walking for an hour and a half during that event, which is pretty tough, with your bike and mountain bike shoes on. As I said, the only disappointing part for me, if I had been able to ride that last climb, I can normally ride that sort of a climb, but I was just gassed so badly. Had I had a little bit more food a bit earlier, and maybe that water, I may have got up, I'm not sure, I may have just had to walk a little bit longer. Maybe I should have walked a little bit longer and actually then not jump back in the bike so soon. But there was plenty of other people getting on or off their bike up there. So yeah, overall it was a fantastic event, but I would definitely, I just wanted to put out a review just for those novices entering that race to have a little bit more information about what you're getting into, and how you need to prep. You definitely need a reasonable bike. I noticed some people out there were on some older bikes, and there was definitely some people on some fat bikes as well, and I'm impressed by anyone going out there and that sort of stuff. But I would personally recommend, a better bike. My bike was $2,500, I think, so not overly expensive, and it did the job really well. I would be using a waist bag, not a camelback, just because I think you heat up too much. Gooing your tyres, definitely, that was a huge game changer for me, not having to, change that tyre, that wheel off, even though I did pull it off and couldn't get it back on, so that lost me a little bit of time. I would practice walking with your mountain bike uphill and having some longer rides, and then getting to some sections where you've got to push your bike. And you're going to have to push your bike no matter who you are. There's going to be some sections on that race where you have to push your bike, but I would, I'd be getting off the bike and probably at least riding for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and then having to push my bike for 15 to 20 minutes up some steep hills just to practice, and making sure those shoes are broken in. I think that's about it. I'm really happy that I did the race. I think for me personally, it was a real sense of achievement. And to be out there for 7 hours, and I've never done anything for 7 hours long. I just haven't completed any event. And I've played 7 games of Australian rules football in one day, and that wasn't 7 hours. They were 2 20-minute halves. And I've done some silly things in my life, but that was pretty crazy. So hats off to everyone that finished yesterday. Really impressive. The camaraderie out there is fantastic, and hats off to those people actually entering the 100 in a few weeks' time or a few months' time. So that's it for now. If I think of anything else, I'll put some notes in the description below as well, and I'll put some notes to just some of the gear that I used. So if you want to know what I actually rode with as a novice rider and was able to get through. Hope you have a great day.